Hello, and what I'd like to try to do today is the third and three installments of Unit 9, which is talking about evolution. We've already talked about fossils, relative and active absolute dating, and we've also talked about natural selection, where we can actually take a species and change them over time. What I want to do today is I want to talk about evidence of evolution, and we're going to start with this slide, which is on homologous structures. And homologous structures are actually set up for anything that occurs with different species but have a similar look or function. And if you look at this, we've actually got 6 different species here. These diagrams have been sort of color-coded so we can actually see like bones in each of them. So you can see that this upper bone it's minuscule in a whale, and then it ends into the phalanges, which are actually the fingers, and you can see that each of them have it with bones sort of in the middle. These organisms evolved from a similar ancestor, but actually are different species, and these things are used for different purposes. Some for walking, some for flying, some for swimming, but they are homologous structures. And one example, what we talk about in terms of organisms evolved from similar species, is we talk about four-limbed evolution. So everything before here was two-limbed or no-limbed, but we had four-limbed evolution, and then we actually go here and we have two broad separations. We'll talk about what this thing is called later on, but basically we have two speciation here, and we have two broad outcomes. We have the mammals going off this way, and we have the non-mammals going off this way, birds and crocodiles. But if we look at this one, we've got a bat and a bird having the same sort of structure for the same purpose. Looks very much the same. They're not homologous structures, then they're, we'll talk about analogies, but analogous structures. And these analogous structures are anything that actually not built the same way but have a similar purpose. And if you take a look, we actually have a moth, we have a dinosaur, we have a bird, and we have a bat, all using these particular bone structures for the 3 big ones, and also a non-bone structure for the moth, but these are analogous structures. Bird wing and bat wing, they were homologous, but they're also analogous. These are unrelated organisms, similar structure, showing that they actually come from a similar environment. They all fly through the air. We also have vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are actually structures that are no longer have a purpose, but they're still inside of organisms. Human examples, the appendix you see right here is an example of a vestigial structure. The appendix is something that you actually have inside your body, and what it does we're not exactly sure, because it doesn't do anything. We can, if this actually collects, you can see it's at the bottom of your large intestine. It tends to collect a lot of bacteria, and if the bacteria actually take over, you can get an infection. This thing can swell, and if it swells too big, it'll burst, which will dump a whole lot of really bad stuff into the body cavity, causing peritonitis and probably death. So if this does cause problem for people, they'll make a small incision, they'll go in there and they'll cut this and cauterize it closed. Doesn't affect which way your food goes. All it did was it may have actually secreted things, or may have been larger in days of old where we actually had much more plant material. Maybe it secreted bacteria in there to break down cellulose, or it actually enlarged this part of the intestine, so we could actually better digest the material. You also have a tailbone called a coccyx. It's actually the bottom part of your spine, and it's made of, you can see a side view and a front view, made of a whole bunch of bones that if enlarged they can become a tail. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the evolutionary development and the embryological development of humans. We have a fish here with a place for an eye but does not have an eye. This one lives in a cave where there is no light, no need for a light a light receptor anymore, so it is a vestigial structure. And this is a whale that still has the resemblance of a pelvis and a back leg, showing that maybe this thing at one point was a land dweller and lost that ability when it moved into the ocean, back into the ocean. Camouflage. The whole idea of a species or an individual is to perpetuate the species, so if you can actually look like something that you're not, maybe you can trick somebody who's trying to eat you into not eating you. So we can actually look at this seahorse right here, which is actually trying to make itself look more like vegetation. We have an octopus making itself look more like the sand, probably not so much to keep from being eaten, but so we can sneak up or actually not have to worry about its prey finding it. This is a bug that looks like a leaf, and this is a praying mantis that looks like a flower. So maybe we can actually get a bug to come in here, and we can have a bird not see this, or we can have a fish not see this or not see that. So it's better the organism blends into the environment, and more likely it is able to survive to perpetuate the species. Mimicry, same thing. We want to be able to hide, and sometimes it's beneficial to mimic things. Like we have a viceroy butterfly, which probably is really tasty to a bird, but the bird is actually tasted to a monarch, and because the monarch feeds on a milkweed, it has a very sour taste, and the bird doesn't particularly care for it, and managed to look at the viceroy as a monarch and not eat it. We have two snake species here. We have the coral snake, where if you have red touches yellow, you're a dead fellow. Red touches black, and you will be back. So we have a poisonous snake and we have a non-poisonous snake. Mimicking, if you actually see this red, black, yellow setup, you're probably going to stay away from it. Here's a walking stick looking like a stick. And you see the frog over here? Pretty easy to see if you actually know you're looking. Oh, wait a minute, there's a second frog. So it looks like they're mimicking maybe even a third frog. Looks like they're actually mimicking the leaves that they're in. And we have an owl down here. Actually looks like an owl, but these are eye spots on the back of a moth. And maybe it can actually keep a raccoon who likes to eat moths from sneaking up on it because it's being seen. So mimicry is when one species or an organism looks like another. And again, more likely to make it survive so it can reproduce. Fossils. When an organism dies, it's got to get removed. In order for it to become a fossil, it's got to be removed from the prey species, predator species, as quickly as possible. Like if this horse were to die, wolves, coyotes, vultures, other things would eat it. So what we have to do is we have to get it to be buried very quickly, and it can be a volcanic ash, can be a landslide, could be mud, could be a flood, could be all kinds of things. But if any time we find a fossil, we know that that organism was buried very soon after it died. It may actually turn into rock. The rock will surround it. Then we'll actually get the rock-shaped or mineral-shaped version of the trilobite in this case, or we may actually get the horse hoof or tooth or other areas of the horse. But what you can see through time from 60 million years ago, the start of the right after 65 million years ago, the start of the Cenozoic, we had this mammal species, probably more like the size of a small dog. But if you take a look at its foot, it was toed, and the tooth very small. And then you can see the 4 toes becomes 3 toes, and that third toe becomes larger, the 2 other side ones become smaller, and then we actually get to the horse that we have today with a hoof and a very large tooth for grinding plant material. So even fossils can tell us what they ate at that time. Embryology. That's not good. Embryology, we don't have that on that slide, I'm sorry. Embryology is actually the study of the development of fertilized egg. And if we take a look at it, we have a human down here. We have a whale, actually it's a dolphin, and you can see similarities between the two. We have a turtle over here, and then we have a chick, or a chicken. So you can see developmental embryology can give us an idea of how they can develop. Ontology is actually the course which is developed that actually looks at an organism and how it actually develops from a fertilized egg. And phylogeny actually is the evolution of the history of the organism. So we have to look at the evolutionary history, and we can look at how an organism develops from an egg, and maybe we can actually put the two together, and that process is called ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In other words, if we look at the developing species, developing individual, we can actually get some idea of how the species developed. So what we have here is we have embryos of 8 different critters. We have early to late development of the embryo, and embryology is the study of an embryo and its development in terms of structures and function. And the longer these guys resemble each other, maybe the more they're related. And if you take a look at these, it's kind of hard to tell which one's which, but they look very similar. They all have gills, they all have tails, they have this bulbous head, they have an eye spot. Not exactly sure what that is, but they've all got it, and they're all have this skin that's around them. So they all look very similar to each other, but it looks like the ones at this end are more similar to the ones that are sort of similar at this end. We look a little later in development, they start showing some contrast. So these two are actually getting longer. We have these all kind of curled. Looks like these are getting some really funky looking heads. These guys don't look too terrible different. They all have hind legs, except you can't really see these two, and I had to put the line there because this is the next one for this one. But you can see that they all have hind legs, they all still have tails, still have gill slits, they still have eyes, they have developing brains. They look very similar. And then we get down to this one, and now you can probably tell what some of them are. We have a fish, we have a salamander, we have a turtle, we have a chicken, we have a pig, and can you tell me what these guys are? They look very similar. This one's lost its tail, these two still have tails. Funky ear on this one. Similar ears sort of on that one. But what we have here is we have a rabbit and a human and a calf. So ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. The longer these guys are the same as they develop, maybe the more they're related through time. DNA and amino acids. DNA and amino acids can be compared in 2 different organisms. Here we have humans and chimpanzees, and you can see that the 23 sets of chromosomes that we have and the 23 sets of chromosomes that the chimp has are very similar. And amino acids, you can look down here for a pig, a chicken, and a fruit fly and actually see that they actually are very similar in amino acids. Remember, amino acids make proteins, so the proteins are probably very similar. And then I threw the picture of a human hand and a chimp hand to actually show the similarities are not only in the DNA, it's also in functionality. They can use their hand the same way we can use our hand, except they're a lot stronger than we are. Phylogenetic trees are cladograms. This is any kind of a diagram that shows relationships of different species as they change over time. So the way they're all set up pretty much the same. Phylogenetic tree is set up more looking like a tree and looks more like this. And what we actually have is we have an ancestor, and then we have a speciation event where this ancestor, for whatever reason, changed into 2 things. One may be very similar to where it was, the other one may be very different. So it also shows descendants. So we have these 4 descendants all from the same ancestor. We have a speciation to differentiate between one and the rest. Then we had another speciation event right there, 2 and the rest. And then we had another one to actually differentiate 3 and 4. So the way it works is we have time, long ago and present. We have a common ancestor, if you're on this branch of this tree. We have speciation events, and there are 3 of them here. And then we have species that are more closely related. And 3 and 4 are more closely related than 3 and 2, or 4 and 2, or 2 and 1, because they're higher up on the tree. Phylogenetic trees also show unique histories. So if we actually look at unique history for B, this is the history of B. Now that's not saying this is all B. This is an ancestor of B, and you can see down here this is unique ancestor of C and becomes C. This is a common ancestor of B and C. This is a common ancestor of A, B, and C. So we can actually see common ancestors in here as well. But this is the unique history for B, this is the unique history for C, and this is the unique history for B and C. Then we have what are called cladograms. Cladograms actually are sort of slanted trees, and they actually show you speciation events. So we had an organism that looked like this, and without this change, they became this critter. And if you got a vertebra, not showing really bones yet, but probably, if you got a vertebra, you actually became this critter. And if you actually acquired a jaw, you can become this critter. And if you acquired 4 legs, you can become this critter. And if you further develop an embryonic egg, you can actually get this critter. And if you can actually develop hair, you can be this critter. And then we have the same thing. We have a very ancient carnivore down here, and the carnivore became one of 3. If you went this way, you became a cat. You came up here, the speciation, and you came up here and you had another speciation. You became the muscids, like skunks and otters, all have musk glands, and if you upset them, they can be a very pungent smell. Also used for perfumes and other things. But then you had another speciation. This one went this way to become the dogs. So we actually have speciation. They're all mammals. These two are not as related as these two, and these two are more related than those two because the speciation happened later in time. So the longer they resemble one another, the more they're related. If you want to watch this Evolution with Dummies, it's a little more than 10 minutes. It actually does a very good job of explaining all the changes that have gone through with time, why they may have happened and when they happened. And then the last slide, phylogenetic tree and cladogram, we're going to talk about human evolution. And all I want to say is that if you take a look at this one, especially this one, we are not related to chimps. Chimps are down here somewhere. Chimps are way down here somewhere, and this one had a branch that became our ancestor. And you can see there was this group that went this way, and they actually died out. They were not successful. And then this group came over, and we had a speciation event where we got this one, and these are all Homo. So this is the Homo speciation, and these guys were the heck of this. This is Australopithecus, and this one, don't remember what the P stands for. Should actually notice that before I start it. But we have the bonsai, the robust. Don't remember why he was what this actually meant. We have Africanus. These were the one probably Lucy we discovered in. Oh, there we go. So this is Lucy that we discovered in Africa, our oldest ancestor, and we can actually see that we've found some of the organisms that go all the way over and become us, as well as some of the ones that are very related to us. We have Homo erectus, Neanderthalis, so they're very similar to Homo sapiens, and we actually now call this the Homo sapien, and we now call ourselves Homo sapien. And then I had to put this picture in here because what would have happened if the other branch that went into here, what would happen if that branch actually became the evolutionary endpoint and we sort of died out, and they found a skull that looks like this, and they would contemplate how we became and what happened to us, rather than we look at ancestors of any of these guys and ask for them. Then I had to throw this other picture in here just because I wanted to show you the intelligence of primates. This was actually taken, I think, 5 or so years ago. This is 2013. This is a black macaque monkey, and what happened is the photographer was taking pictures and he got called away by some activity in this group of monkeys, and one of the monkeys actually saw her reflection in the camera and started working the mechanism to take a picture. And this is a self-portrait of this monkey. And I know that went through some fake issues way back when, but it is for truth. That is a self-portrait of a black macaw. Okay, thank you much for stopping by, and that is the last installment for Evolution. And if I can go back in here and we can stop.